Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. I am Ray, your humble reviewer, and today I will be reviewing some recent and classic LitRPG audiobooks for you. This afternoon, I'm going to begin with Shards of Reality, Enter the Realm, written by Timothy W. Long, narrated by Todd Meneses, with a book's length of 10 hours and 51 minutes.
Blessing of the Five upon you, the woman said. Thanks, I replied. The Five? That rang a few bells, but my head was too out of it to even deal. You ever have one of those mornings where you feel like you drank yourself into oblivion and did something monumentally stupid the night before? Well, I felt a lot like that, multiplied by 10,000. Something stupid. Now that did ring a bell. Something on the edge of my memory. Friends in need, my fight to survive, and then my death. Magic spells and me battling a beast of some sort. The memory faded, and I was left staring slack-jawed at my shirt sleeve. I shuddered. What was I wearing? My sleeve fell back to reveal my pale wrist, but not before I noticed the fabric that could only be called rough-spun cloth, and it felt like some shitty wool sweater my grandmother would have given me when I was 10 and we lived in Montana. This was a hell of a dream.
Shards is a really fun lit RPG novel. It follows your basic premise, in which the protagonists find themselves in a virtual reality, as players in the games usually do, but then sometimes they enter the game there at their own request or of their own free will, sometimes not. For example, Viridian Gate Online has a player enter a game to escape a world that is going to be destroyed by an asteroid. Reboot has a player die and his brain is uploaded into the game. Here, the protagonist, Walt, wakes up in a popular MMORPG that he has played numerous times, but he has no memory of how he got there. He is utterly clueless as to what has caused his current situation. Worse yet, he's a newbie character, not the one that he spent a voluminous amount of time leveling and building up. Now, as as time passes, Walt manages to find a few other people who are in the same predicament as him, players who also have absolutely no recollection of how they got there. So there's a nice little mystery of what's going on, how do they get there, why are they there, why don't they know who they are. It's a pretty good little thinking piece in addition to all the other action. Now the scary thing is that they may not be able to leave. All right, so this is sort of like a trapped in a game trope, but with the added event of amnesia. I mean, honestly, Thamon's Respawn, I don't know if you remember me reviewing this a while back, it really tried to go for this feel, but it didn't quite hit the mark. In Respawn, he really didn't have a lot of answers about anything. You know, like the guy had no clue why he was there, where he was at, what he was doing. He just knew he had to keep, restarting every time he got killed. But if you like Respawn, you'll love this book. It's really good, and I think it's a situation of improvement over that story because we do get answers to certain things. I'm not going to clue you in on anything, but I do have to warn you. The book does start out just a weensy bit slowly, but it only does so that you're able to basically keep up with the same pace as the characters. The one aspect that I really liked about this book is that it's not bogged down by a ton of stats like most lit RPG books. Yeah, they do grind and they do level and they improve their stats, but the stats don't run by every 5 minutes like you get in some books. So let me tell you that the insistent listing of stats can be a little annoying, and I liked how Jeff Hayes kind of played that out with a whole bunch of the stats just going up all at once, like, level up, 5 points gained, all being said in one great big grouping rather than, one after another for 5 minutes straight. I give him a lot of credit for doing that. It was a really good idea. And I also enjoyed how that didn't overwhelm the listener. I mean, I hate it when I get bogged down with just the same thing being repeated 8 times. It's like, well, my book had a 108,000 word count, but 40,000 of them were the same sentence repeated over and over again. It doesn't have that feel here. Another nice touch is that the characters all earn what they get. And I have to emphasize that point, that they earn their skills, their levels. There is no OP character to be found here. Additionally, the characters are played like regular people, okay? By that, I mean Oz, for example, whines and cries just like most of us would at the levels of exertion he goes through and the pain that he endures just to level up. Walt himself can kind of come across as a bit of a jerk at times, and I can see him being off-putting to some listeners. All I can say is that you'll either really get him and his sense of humor, or you won't, and you won't like him very much. It's just one of those, there's no middle ground kind of guys. You're either going to hate him or you're going to love him. And that can be hard on a listener when you're not fond of the protagonist. I, however, did enjoy the man quite a bit. Another item that I should address is that some readers might take umbrage that the book ends on a cliffhanger. Cliffhanger. I know some readers who absolutely flip out when they have that happen to them. This is no big deal to me. I can always handle a cliffhanger so long as I know that there is more coming. I just put this out there because I know how it can get sometimes to people who end up being surprised, so to speak, by a sudden cliffhanger. And if you read like Rick Scott, you know, his Dodge Tank and Shards and sort of that thing, you know, every book he does is going to end on a cliffhanger, so you shouldn't be shocked or stunned. But here, I'm just giving you advance warning. The writing is smooth, the dialogue is snappy, and the plot really picks up once they hit their main quest. And that's important to realize, is it does start a little slow, but it's not that bad. It's just giving you setup. So once the setup is done, the story takes off like a rocket. The characters do play out like real people, not one-dimensional cutouts. I mean, by that I mean, if you cut them, they will bleed. And then they're going to yell at you about cutting them, or they're going to run away crying. It's kind of a toss-up. The narration is crisp and clean, and it's fun to listen to. Todd Meneses really pulls out all the stops, sets off some fireworks, and blows up the bells and whistles in the kitchen sink. He really brings this story to life, and you won't find any faults with his work. I enjoyed it. I thought he did a really good job. I haven't heard him very often. I think maybe one other book that I've listened to with him. So this was a good book for me to pick up and get to learn a little bit about him with. The book is fun. It does enjoy a nice pace. Things are explained, and the characters do get rolling once they get on their big quest. So I don't mind a slow burn as long as there is a payoff. And we do get payoff. And there's an excellent setup for the next book. So don't miss out. I'm going to give this book, and I think I went through this pretty quickly. I don't know why I talked so fast this time. I didn't digress. That might be the case. I usually just go off on these really weird tangents, and this time I was pretty focused, and I thought I did. See, there I go. Okay. I'm going to give this book 8 stars. It is solid, but it does take a little bit of time to build before the real momentum kicks in. So just because there is that aspect of it, and as much as I say that I don't mind the cliffhanger, I know it's going to drive some people bonkers, so I cut a few things off of that, but not really a whole lot. I mean, really, it's negligible. But 8 stars, this is a solid story. I think it's going to be a really great series. I haven't gotten anything else in this book series yet. I don't know if anything else is on Audible, but I will be picking up the next book when it does come out. I think you'll enjoy it too, so enjoy. The next book I'll be reviewing is Freehaven Online, Dragonsbane, a LitRPG adventure by June Prince, narrated by Amy Landon. The book's length is 12 hours and 14 minutes.
I circle around my creation in virtual space. There's no walls, no texture, just a spotlight-piercing blackness with no horizon. The creature, a once man, has a human base, hence the name. But I've added a violent tail whip, embedded with razor spines for slashing damage. I imagine the monster in-game, guarding some boss's hoard with its wicked black claws, 2 long fingers, needle teeth, and protuberant amphibian eyes. Come, I say, but the creature waddles forth like a penguin. I raise my hand for it to stop and shake my head. The party you've encountered just died of laughter. What do you think, Sal? It wasn't good, the voice says, female and disembodied. I hear mirth in her tone. Robotic emotional neuters are a thing of the past, unless they're intentionally programmed that way.
So, with this book, I think that my personal profession gives me a bit of a different light to look at it in. As a funeral director, I kind of see this book in a light that I don't think most of you will. This, to me, was a pretty interesting introspection on a character going through the grieving process. June really looks at loss in a couple of ways, and I can't explain a lot of it because some of it would be spoilery, and I don't do spoilers. I'm a lot like River Song like that. He goes into how grief affects your lives, and I appreciated that aspect because I've never seen it done in a lit RPG before. In this case, the main character, Justine's brother, has died sometime in the past, and she sort of decides to steal his account because he had an account in a game that she did not play, and she has an account in a game that he did not play. But the two games are merging together, and she would like to save his character. In fact, what she really does is in the beginning of the book, she kind of sneaks into his game persona and just kind of lives vicariously as him for a bit. She tries to get a feel for who he was in the game and what he did. You know, he has a guild of toxic muffins, and she kind of wonders about his friends that he has there. So it's really a pretty decent look at what you would do if you were grieving and you could kind of slip into the shoes of somebody you love for a little while, even if it was just a game character. Virtual reality, I think this would be an accurate portrayal of what will happen at some point in the future. I'm sure there will be somebody out there who dies, and one of their family members will take over their avatar, so to speak, and live through them vicariously for a while, just out of memory of their loved one. So, I mean, I thought that was a pretty decent concept. And now, Justine's brother doesn't really give her a lot of information to go on before he dies. So that's probably one of the best parts, is that she has to come to conclusions on her own because nobody magically shows up and tells her how great her brother was or what a D-bag he was to other characters. She has to figure out how to play his character all on his own. And the book deals with loss in like a few other ways, especially when the players become trapped in the game. Now, this is not a spoiler. That's in the description. But I have to tell you that, you know, dealing with the loss, the possibility of never going home again, that's grief. And so that is, and there's one character who really, really goes off the deep end in the grieving process because he can't make it home. He has things he needs to do. So again, that's just another aspect that I really appreciated because it was very realistic. I give June a lot of credit for his insight on how people would behave. I just really think there's a lot of things that he hit on right down the line. It was like, wow, that was pretty spot on. I've seen stuff like this before. Also, some players learn that there is a way to permanently join the game, but they may die permanently in the process. And that leads to some complications. And Prince clearly does not make it easy, as the grieving process never really is just a simple emotional thing. So, like I say, he's got a lot going on just from that perspective alone. Now, do I think that that's great for everybody? I think that it's interesting. It was really fascinating for me. But what do you read a lit RPG book for? For the action, for the stories, for the gaming aspects. So I have to say, one of the things I really enjoyed also was the concept of the two games merging together. I mean, let's be honest, not every game can end up like World of Warcraft and exist in perpetuity. I mean, so how can games stay alive? By merging with another game that's also losing traction? I mean, honestly, can you imagine if, like, City of Heroes, one of my favorite games of all time, merged with, say, EverQuest? How cool would that be? I mean, that's a great idea. The story has some innovative battles and cool quests and dragons and interesting NPCs, but it's not without its own issues. First, the whole trapped in the game thing kind of comes out of left field. I've got to be honest with you. Even though I read the book blurb, the description, and knew it was coming, there really was no reason to, for it to just happen. I think it could have either been one of those things that they find out after they're in game and it's just there, or there was a real purpose for everything. It just kind of came way late in the book for me for that to have occurred. It was just a little bizarre when it happened. It was jarring. Even if you've read the book's description, like I say, you knew it was coming. It was just weird. A lot of possible ramifications were overlooked. I mean, like, okay, so you're trapped in a game and the game says it's going to keep you alive, but what if a single parent had just gotten online before the hack happened and stuck everybody in the game? their young kids would be left alone to fend for themselves, even if the parent was kept alive by the VR tech, which is really never explained how they do that, but I'm going to take it with a grain of salt and say, okay, the technology allows it. It could be days before they're ever found. So there could be kids that starved to death, died of dehydration, or just lived in squalor, not cleaning themselves, babies especially. That was one of those things that I thought, wow, there was an opportunity there to touch on as a player, freaking out because you've got a baby at home. Somebody in the background could have been talking about this. That would have been really cool. I would have loved to see the other players were voicing these concerns. We do have, a dad who wants to get back home to his kids. But another concept, what if you're a player and you take medication? What if you're diabetic and you have to have insulin? How does that play into it? I think that was something else overlooked. Now, I'm not saying that he didn't do a great job with the whole concept, but I think he missed a couple things that I would have thrown in there just as a curveball to the readers to make them really think. Because honestly, just because some people would go into the game permanently, that might be something you'd have to do just on the hopes that you could survive in some other way. If you know that you don't get your medication within a certain period of time, you're going to die, and there's no help coming, do you risk going into the game and permanently becoming character or dying? I thought that would have been really fascinating to see. The biggest issue that I had, and only because I could see it being confusing, was that the MC, the main character Justine, as well as the other players, could kind of all switch between their alts at any time. That one, it made it really hard for me to connect with Justine as a character. Example, I enjoyed Scooty Woodhams, but the dwarf, that's a dwarf by the way, a dwarf character, a sun-worshipping dwarf, got bounced as the party dictated, the needs dictated. Well, we need Scooty Woodhams for this, or we need her brother's character for that. I was really fully expecting a merging of the brother's character and her own characters. I think the melding would have played better so that you had one big character after everything, because the way it was first stated was, this new character you're creating will have all the capabilities that your other players will have, and so on and so forth. And so I thought that would be one of those things where you basically make a new character who has, he's an uber class, or she's an uber class, so that all the things that you loved about these other classes are now playable in that one. But that's not how it worked. You kind of switched back and forth between the characters as needs be. So it kind of made it hard for me to connect a lot. There was just too much bouncing. I just think that, the melding would have been there much better. It would have really amped up the story if everybody was struggling to suss out what their capabilities were after the merge. Honestly, if you were a handful of classes and each one kind of clashed with each other, how do you adjust to that? I don't have anything right off the top of my head, but a fighter and a mage, let's say the mage can't wear armor to cast spells, but you've got a tank, and he's got to wear armor to do that. So he can't cast spells while he's out there, or they need spells, but he's in his armor. That sort of thing would have been pretty cool to kind of see. And just as it was a choice of picking your COH superhero or EverQuest druid whenever you wanted to that in this game, and you could just switch back and forth. So if you wanted to play your slasher, you could play your slasher character, or your druid from EverQuest, you could do that. And it was just kind of neat to see that capability, but I'd rather have had the slasher druid class come together and have a wooden knife druid going around or something like that. Just like I say, that was the biggest two issues that I had, was that one thing came out of left field, and that the character class thing just kind of didn't play out as well as I'd hoped. It wasn't bad. I don't want to say that at all, but it just didn't work as well as I think it should have. Now, I did appreciate that Justine's squad was basically just a playground group. The kind of group where you just wander around the playground and go, hey, you want to play? You want to play in the sandbox, or you want to go do this, or whatever? That's what it was. It was just a wander around and ask. And, this was a LFG group of people, looking for a group, druid looking for a group. And that's not something you often see in LitRPG. Most times it's the characters all know each other, they're old friends, they've been doing this for a long time, or they're guild members, so on and so forth. you don't really have a bunch of strangers coming together. I like that aspect a lot. I really did. Most times you enter a game with one or two other people that you know playing, and you go around shouting, looking for a tank or looking for a rogue, if you need one, So in this case, that really worked out well because she knew literally nobody. The story was good and well written, but I do have an issue connecting to the characters as much as I would have liked to have. I love the underlying theme of grief that plays throughout the book, but it was really hard to connect sometimes with the characters. The narration by Landon was fair. There were times I just could not connect to her at all. She was very clear when she spoke, but her non-dialogue bits lacked any emotion at all. I mean, just go back and listen to the book's audio clip, okay? She says almost the same sentence separately. She says almost each sentence separately and without any kind of inflection. Her dialogue isn't bad, and she does some decent accents, but I could not connect with her reading style much at all. I mean, honestly, it was very distant and seemed cold. She's not bad, but she really needed to add some energy into the reading, the non-dialogue portions. This had a major impact on me, as I found it was a little harder not only to connect with the characters because of the things that they were doing, but because of her speaking, okay? And it really did an effect on the fight scenes. They were just really the fight scenes could have been a little punchier, and I think that even though June had some innovative battles, the fighting itself could have been punchier. He could have been a little bit more descriptive, but she could have really amped it up and saved him a lot if she just stepped up her game and just gave a little bit more oomph to the readings of the battles themselves. And that doesn't happen here. So, just on the basis that I enjoyed the narration, but was not enamored of it, and that was a big factor here. And a few other factors, such as having a hard time identifying with the MC's rotating character class and the wonky delivery of the game trap, I'm going to give this 7.3 stars. I enjoyed the book, I really did, but I felt that some issues could have been better addressed, and it really needed a class, a new class or a single class, for me to latch onto as a reader or a listener. I just could not say, great job, Scooty Woodhams, because Scooty was here or there and back again. It just, one of those things I really wish, and to be honest with you, I can't even tell you what her brother's character's name was. I can tell you, she said switch to my brother's character more often than she actually said the name to me in my mind. And that's just how I viewed it. There was no real connection there. So that's why, honestly, the book really had a great amount of underlying themes, great concept. It worked powerfully, but I did need, in a desperate way, a connection to the characters that I didn't have. I needed a little bit stronger narration that I just did not see. So it had to be, 7.3. And like I said, the hardest thing for me to really come to grips with was, the way that the stuck in the game trope kind of hit. So 7.3, it's not bad. It's really good. I think that you'll enjoy it. So give it a shot. Next up, we have Viridian Gate Online Cataclysm, Book 1 of the Viridian Gate Archive series, written by James A. Hunter, narrated by Armin Taylor, and has a book length of 8 hours and 44 solid minutes.
A trio of guards, lesser fiends identical to the menacing goat-hoofed creatures we'd seen on patrol several times, milled about. Two sported heavy mail shirts and held beefy poleaxes topped with wicked curved axe heads, which looked equally well suited for blocking an incoming blade or goring an enemy, spilling ropes of intestine to the ground. I blanched at the thought of going up against those monsters, even if this was only a game. The third guard lingered in the back, near the portal. Instead of mail, this one wore rough-stitched robes, a deep cowl drawn up around its inhuman visage. It held a short bronze dagger in one hand and a gnarled staff in the other. A spellcaster of one variety or other, then. As formidable as the two poleaxe-wielding creatures looked, I knew the sorcerer in the back was the biggest threat. If we could get to him, he'd probably go down quickly, but at a distance he'd lay down some serious firepower.
All right, folks, I don't mean to interrupt this review, but I do need to say one thing before I get started. I swear to God, Prop Guy, if you hit me in the head with a rock while I'm doing this, I will bash you silly. Don't even consider it. No. No rocks. Sorry. I'm doing Viridian Gate, so he's thinking asteroids would be funny this time. So, you've seen these books where something goes horribly wrong and people end up trapped in a digital world as players. Maybe there's been a zombie apocalypse like Dave Wilmore's Land of the Undying, or maybe resources are low and people can't feed themselves, so they go there to just kind of chill out. Or maybe it's an alternate form of afterlife for people to have a second chance, like in Domino Finn's reboot. Well, James Hunter decided that none of that stuff was big enough for him. Nope. Not big enough anyway to go into an MMORPG for life permanently. No. He figured that the only way he would do something like that would be if the whole world got taken out. So he sent a massive asteroid to destroy his world. And apparently it's one without Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck to save it. So I have to say this approach was a smashing success. And you can insert your cricket sounds here. That's not funny. I'm sorry. Okay. But you have to admit it works. I have to say I really appreciated how it didn't take 3 chapters to get into VGO for this interesting take on the LitRPG game lit genre. It shows some familiar twists and turns, but they're done in brilliant ways. Hunter has a really nice flowing writing style. He knows how to open and close a chapter, and his ability to do dialogue is fantastic. I would put this book up amongst the ranks of Delvers LLC, Awaken Online, Ascend Online, and so on. One thing about the book that has really got going on for it is just basically the characters. Now, this isn't to say that the game isn't fascinating, or the world isn't fascinating, or that the plot isn't impactful, but the vibrancy and the realism of the characters is what makes this book shine. Grimjack is complex. He's both a thinker and a doer. Usually MCs are one or the other, but Grimjack's actions manage to make sense of his nature. I especially enjoyed the way in which the character used his head rather than his hammer to defeat his foes, although he does do some good head bashing from time to time, and it really came into play especially well during the big Godzilla Mothra versus Mothra fight at the end. Now, for example, early on in the game, whenever he's given a choice to abandon an old woman to die alone or help her, he kind of increases his risk of capture or death if he helps, but he decides to help against the advice of his newfound companion. And by doing so, by using his gut and his head, he does something pretty slick that he wouldn't have gotten a chance to do otherwise. Now, the companion I'm talking about is a whole different kind of beast than Grimjack. Cutter is Grimjack's sidekick partner in crime, and he's a complete jerk. He's a ne'er-do-well. He's a reluctant hero who is very clearly more mercenary than he is merciful. But he is one thing, and that is loyal to the core. There's also Abby, who is Grimjack's love interest, who is a strong, independent woman who is basically responsible for getting the team together in the hopes of stopping the devs from creating a permanent feudal society where the rich remain on top. She's the whole reason that Grimjack is there in the first place and has the capability to do what he does in the series. She has a couple little things hidden up her sleeve that nobody knows about until it's too late. Abby is a really cool character, and it's my understanding that we're going to be getting to see a whole series of books about Abby here in the near future as well. So that's exciting. I think she deserves it, and I like that too because it just goes to show that as great as Grimjack is, and this is where I give Hunter a lot of credit, you can't make Grimjack responsible for everything happening. I mean, soul power players are great for stories, but realistically, it's just not possible for one person to do everything and have the success that Grimjack is having. So we're going to get to see some things that Abby does in the background that you don't know about, or so on and so forth, just to kind of bolster that, yeah, Grimjack is really cool, but he does have some powerful friends and allies who can do a lot of stuff too. They're not just like, we're here to back you up. And that's important. Now, one thing that I did like a lot was that the book did not focus on having to level up or power level in a hurry. it happened as it happened. Leveling was a gradual process and a natural process and was not the main focus of the characters. No. Now, they had more important matters to attend to, such as stopping a rather evil gentleman from getting his hands on an item of power and basically rebuilding a keep. They had to stay out of the way of the view of the people long enough to achieve their goals. So just imagine how you would feel if after you are in, you find out the game you're in is rigged heavily in favor of some members of the upper 1%, and that you're essentially going to be fated to be an eternal servant. That would take precedence over power leveling for its own sake. Now, they do level, and there's reasons behind it, because they need to, but it's not super power leveling. It's step by step. It's a very big process, and especially in Grimjack's acquisition of his class. That is not something that's done within 5 chapters. It goes on for a good bit, and it's really neat to experience as he does so. So basically, in this book, you come for the asteroids, and you stay for the characters and the tribulations that they face. All right. Now, Armin Taylor was a palpable force while narrating. He played out the entire cast of characters in different voices, and each of their personalities shined through. He was a one-man troupe in a play of dozens. Taylor makes Cutter sound like a young Mick Jagger. He's all cocky and vitrolic, and I love to point out that he had to have practiced on that voice for hours because it comes across so perfectly. Honestly, the first time I heard Cutter speak, I thought Taylor was English, and just that was it. He was just totally just doing his regular everyday speaking accent, and Cutter was him, and everything else was the act. I mean, he just nails Cutter to pieces. And like I say, if you listen to Cutter and you listen to Mick Jagger at any point, boy, they sound the same. And that's what's so great, because Cutter is Mick Jagger in personality. He's a strutter. He's a bragger. He's full of himself. He's full of hot air. But he's good at what he does. So he's justified in those feelings. So yeah, Cutter and Jagger, I mean, that was a perfect meshing of those voices. And one thing that really kills me about Taylor is that he doesn't raise his voice or yell when a character in the story yells. Some people will be like, Billy, I said to come over here right now! And they raise their voice, But what Taylor does is what you would do if you were a kid and you were playing with your action figures and you were trying to stress the drama, and you'd say, Darth Vader says, "Search your feelings, Luke." And you're playing with your little action figure, and Luke goes, "I don't feel anything, Darth Vader." And he goes, "No, search your feelings. I'm your father." And then Luke says, "No, that's not possible." That's the voice he uses when he yells. That, "Oh no, don't go over there, Abby." It's so funny because it's so true. And so few narrators do that voice. Even though I know I've heard 100 kids do it as I've grown up. I've done that as I grew up. I'd take my little action figures and play on the stairs, and I'd scream like that just so I didn't wake up my dad. Okay, but I knew the guy was yelling, and he does it. It's just total fun. It's a sort of a whisper yell, and he nails it, and it's just a blast. I love every single time he does it. I adore it. Okay, just the same way I love every time that James Hunter says somewhere in the book that a character goes ass over teacups. I just think it's the funniest thing. So he does a great job, and this was my first introduction to him as a narrator, and as that, I've grown to love listening to him a lot. I really am happy anytime I get to hear him do a book. Okay, he is just one of those guys that when his voice comes out, you're like, yes, he's back at it. He is back at it. So I enjoy Taylor a lot. I really, really do. Now, I've stated repeatedly in past reviews that this is one of my favorite series, and this is the book that really started the ball rolling for it, and I can't help but want to share the love. So I'm actually going to trim the score back just a little bit because I'm such a fan, and I can't help it because my enthusiasm is way too powerful sometimes. So this is the first book. It did have some things to work out, but I'm still I'm having a hard time giving this a low score or a lower score, but I'm going to say 8.3 stars because it just has so much going on for it, really. And this is how good of a series it is. Somebody out there, some knucklehead, I won't say your name, basically stole the entire story and just redid it with a female lead and put it out. She liked it that much. I think the book would be great if there was a female lead. I will just insert female for male and go from there. Totally did it. Totally did it. That's how good a book this is. It inspired somebody to utterly plagiarize, almost verbatim, the entire book. That's like high praise, because imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. However, plagiarism is complete theft, and it's not happy time when it happens. But it tells you a story about how good this is, doesn't it? This is an amazing story. I've heard a lot of books out there. I've read a lot of books out there, but I have very few times seen somebody be so blatant and bold as to swipe and completely cover a book like this. I can see, bands doing cover albums from start to finish. That was a cover album because it was labor of love, or it was just I can make money doing this kind of thing. Either way, it just shows how brilliant this book is. So, like I said, I'm being really nice to you guys, trimming it back because I don't want to be overblown and hyper on this. It's just one of my favorite series, okay? It's a brilliant character study that happens to have a lot of fighting and monsters and adventures going on in it. Oh, and just to let you know, Book 6 comes out on the 16th with an Audible release about 2 months after that. I'm believing that it's going to be Armin Taylor doing that again. I know they're trying to figure out if they have somebody else do that just to kind of set it apart. But I don't think that's the case. And either way, I'm happy. I like Armin a lot. And I do have a story in that. It's an anthology. So you can complain about how bad I am or how great I am or whatever you think about it. I'm happy to hear from you because it is something that I wrote. It was a labor of love. And like I said, I will be utterly honest when I do my review. I can't read it. I'll have to listen to it. So it'll be a few months from now when that comes out. Cheers. Well, I'm sorry. That's the end of the show this week. I really would like to thank you so much for watching, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here. I'm really hoping the sound is much better improved as we go through this. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch or listen to the show. If you want to support us, I would like to remind you that you can like the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast Facebook page or the YouTube page, or just share and like the video. That's pretty important. What I would always ask is please, as always, leave a comment below or in one of the Facebook shares that we have. It's important for me to get feedback to let me know what you guys think of how I'm doing. I really do like chit-chatting with y'all. Just remember, talk to me and let me know what you like or don't like about the show. I will never not listen to anybody. You can always follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. And for the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast, I'm Ray. Keep listening.